So, I think I've talked about this before, but I just want to talk about it one more time. Because, as of late, a lot of people have been, bringing up Ken Penders and how he basically may have not told the truth and everything. And, when it came to ownership of certain characters and stuff like that. And the reason people bring this up suddenly again, well, not suddenly, but once again, I should say, this past week, is, due to the fact that 2 days ago, that being the 19th of this month, July, marked 5 years since the Archie book officially came to a close. Basically, since Archie's, ended ties, if you will. They ended ties with, well, I should say Sega severed ties, if you will, with Archie. They basically ended a partnership, and then not that long after, San Diego Comic-Con, which ironically is also coming up this weekend for the first time in about 2-3 years. At San Diego Comic-Con, they made the announcement that they had struck a deal with IDW, where we currently are now when it comes to the Sonic book. And of course, ever since then and up till now, fans were always hoping that we would get the Freedom Fighters in the IDW book. And even though in the Sonic Forces, I guess you could say, epilogue books before the official book, we did get like little pictures of Bunny and Sally in the background in one panel where Rouge was, I think, talking to Shadow or something, or communicating with Shadow from an office. So we got that, and that's all we got since then. And fans have always wanted more about that, or more to that. And Ian Flynn, even though he said he's fighting, he's campaigning to get the characters in, nothing of significance has happened. Nothing of significance, if you will, has happened. I'm just adjusting the mic there. I do apologize. But yeah, nothing of significance has happened. Just checking something. Okay, just checking something there, but like I said, nothing of significance, has happened. So, yeah, the reason this is brought up again is because of the fact that they still blame, and in a sense, as I said in one video previously, rightfully so, Ken for the characters not being there anymore because of his lawsuit and everything. Now, here's the thing. As I said before, does Ken take, a lot of the blame? Absolutely. He takes a lot of the blame. He has to share it. There's no getting around that if I'm Ken Penders. There's no getting around it. He has to share the blame. Because if it wasn't for him, the characters would still be around. And he knows that. He absolutely knows that. So, yeah, he does take some of the blame, but again, Ian Flynn, needs to share responsibility too, because, he at least should have spoke up. I mean, if he heard rumblings and stuff happening, he should have at least spoke up. But he didn't. And even if he did, hear some rumblings, he should have at least let the fans, be informed that, hey, change is coming. It may not be what what you'll like or what you'll support, but this is why the change is coming. At least give us a clue, if you know what I mean. But again, he didn't even do that. However, though, that's not entirely what the video I'm doing here is about, because I'm here to talk about one particular thing, one particular moment, if you will, when it came to the comic. And that particular moment has to do with one of his Ken Penders storylines being altered, and I've mentioned it before. Now, we know he was upset when Locke got killed off because that's his character, and obviously he and Flynn didn't have permission to do that. Or get his consent, to do that. Or do any of the other significant changes that he did when it came to the characters of the Echidnas or any of the characters Ken had created. So obviously, that played a part, but there was one particular story that played more of a significant part, I think, or at least got the ball rolling. One continuity or story arc that got the ball rolling, and Ken deciding to copyright his characters at the behest of his wife, or so he says. Now, the story arc that I'm talking about, that I believe began the downward spiral, if you will, of Ken copyrighting, his characters and taking Archie to court, over that, wasn't because of what he did with the Echidnas, or not, it wasn't because, I should say, what he and Flynn did with the Echidnas, no. It wasn't that. It was mainly because of the fact that there was a story. There was a story that Ken originally wrote called Mobius Years Later. And basically the story originated in 134. Yes, that 134 issue of Archie Sonic with the infamous slap in the main story. And it depicted the characters not only grown up, but married and having kids of their own, or in some cases, teenagers of their own. And the reason this story, I think, or this continuity, I believe, got the ball rolling in Ken's decision to copyright his characters was mainly because of the fact that, and I know there's an argument about this here and there, but it was mainly because of the fact that, from what I understood when I first read the story arc, when Ken wrote it, was that, the future that he was depicting these characters in, Sonic and Sally being married and being king and queen, having teenage son and daughter named Manic and Sonya, basically, a tribute or an homage to Sonic Underground, that debuted years before, to Lawless Sue, Knuckles and Julie Sue's daughter, and such. the significance about the story arc, from what I remember, is Ken, I believe in his own words, wanted this to be the true future. That's what is, what he said. You know, sorry for the pause there. Just thinking about what I was going to say. But like I said, from what I understood, wanted Mobius years later to be the future. The true future. Or, as he's interpreted and kind of changed the story of, one of the possible futures. Nothing, not a what-if deal, not an alternate zone or dimension or anything like that. He wanted Mobius years later, or 25 years later as it was known, to be the future, or at least one of the possible futures. Basically, this was, in his mind, the outcome that was going to be. How we got there, from a continuity standpoint, I think he was, in my opinion, I think he was planning to talk about, or at least showcase in a follow-up, because he did have a follow-up planned. Had he remained with the book, he had a follow-up planned, but that never happened. But I'm assuming that he planned to kind of expand on that storytelling of, how we got. I mean, he does kind of give a hint in the main story of how we possibly got to the future that we're at. But, that was about it. That was about it. But he had gone on record originally, from what I remember, and said that this was the future. This was, the future of the freedom fighters. This was the future of, of Sonic and Sally, of Knuckles and Julie Sue, and so on. Of Tails and Mina, if you will. This was the future. And what happened is that when Ian took over and decided to resume Mobius years later, as a side project, as a side project, basically, for the main book, kind of like its own little individual story, and then, its own follow-up to that side project. Basically, Ian Flynn, what he did was, well, to use it as an example, Ian Flynn was kind of like the new director, if you will, taking over for the original director. So when studios get a new writer or a new director for the sequel to a hit film, obviously they're either going to stay true to what the original source material was, or they're going to change it where it'll be, completely different. It'll be something, that, has a connection to the original continuity-wise, but is going off in a different direction that some would say makes sense and some would say doesn't make sense. Or some say will connect and doesn't connect. And, when it comes to Mobius years later, that's kind of what it was. I mean, Ken had one vision. Ian Flynn went off, and when he did the sequel, if you will, the follow-up that Ken originally wanted to do, but to probably obviously do it differently. When Ian decided to take that, opportunity, or take the wheel on that, yeah, some would say he gave a satisfactory ending, at the time. But it was like, okay, you know, why is Sally now married? But there were so many questions. Like, why was Sally married to Shadow? And, Ken, I think, did say he had something planned like that. But, going a little further. Like, okay, why is Ling Da now evil again when she was, like, kind of in the middle and more on the side of good? There was just a lot of questions. A lot of questions that fans wanted answered. And even Ken, I think, wanted answered too. Like, there was some of his ideas being used, but like I said, there were some of his ideas being used, but not all of them, and some of them that were used were changed significantly. But you're probably wondering to yourself, well, Ian doing his own continuation and follow-up to the original story, that isn't bad, right? At least he's still, confirming what Ken wanted, that this is the future, right? Or at least one of the possible futures. Well, here's the thing. What Ken had planned was similar, it seems like, but totally different. Like he planned, like the way he ended the original story, it was on a cliffhanger. But he seemed to have some resolution to where it was going to go in a similar direction, but differently. Like he had plans where I guess the future Sonic would go back in time, but then come back, or something. And it just, it just didn't work out. It just didn't work out the way he was planning, the way he was hoping. So even though it did kind of follow what he wanted, there were changes in there that even he kind of pointed out. And one significant change that he pointed out that was noted later on when Ian brought it up was the fact that, this wasn't the future that Ken said was one of the possible futures, or the future of the continuity. Instead, it was now viewed as an alternate future, or a what-if future. And that didn't sit well with Ken. Ken didn't like that. He argued that. But then, later on, they decided to, I guess, take it a step further when they did a whole 4-part Sonic Universe story based on Mobius years later, this time called 30 years later. Kind of a follow-up to what Ian had created. And now, it wasn't just viewed as as a possible, alternate future and all that, or what if future. It was now looked at as an alternate dimension, because the character they involved in this follow-up was Silver, and they made it sound like in the story that Silver had gone to an alternate dimension, an alternate timeline, or an alternate future, basically another world, similar, if not identical, to the Sonic Prime world, or Mobius Prime world. So yeah, once that got revealed that, hey, it may not be a what if or alternate timeline or alternate future or what if scenario, there was also an alternate dimension identical to the original dimension. Yeah, that didn't sit well with Ken. And I think because of that, not just because of the whole Echidna thing, as well, or the behest of his wife to copyright his characters, which you can believe and take with a grain of salt when he mentions that. But I think it was the Mobius years later situation, that got the ball rolling, and it not being continued on as being one of the possible futures, true futures, of the prime continuity of the book, in my opinion. That's the way I see it, because when you connect the dots, honestly, it makes a lot of sense. Like I said, it just makes a lot of sense that, like I said, it just makes a lot of sense in my opinion that's where I feel the ball started to get rolling, when this all happened. So that's how I feel where it makes sense. But yeah, in closing, that's just my opinion. I could be wrong, but I've always felt that just because of the timing of it and his reaction, not just along with what Ian did otherwise to some of his, as resolution to some of his other story arcs, as well as, resolution to the other characters he created. I don't think it's just, all of that made Ken decide, again, to copyright his characters at the behest of his wife. Whether you believe that or you don't, take it with a grain of salt. But I think it was when they changed the status of what Mobius years later was, from being a possible, one of a few possible futures, or one of the true possible futures for the prime continuity, to a, what if alternate timeline, then later on alternate dimension timeline, version. I think when the changes to that status were made, that is when the ball started to get rolling, in my opinion. But what do you guys think? What are your thoughts? Do you think I'm just grasping for straws, or do you think I have a point here? Let me know down below in the comments, as well as in the live chat during the premiere. Like the video. Super chat, super stickers will be enabled during the live chat of the premiere. Super thanks afterwards. The podcast, you will also hear this on my BW Roses Discussion podcast. But let me know what your guys' thoughts are. Again, it's just my opinion, but when you kind of look at, the timeline of how things domino affected, I think it started here, in my opinion. I truly do. But let me know what your thoughts are down below. Check out the Teespring store. Until then,